Hey, pastors and leaders, let's talk about these three truth-sharing environments in your church or ministry. This is important, especially if you're learning how to use our resources to create a discipleship culture. You got to understand these three environments. Okay, so it goes from big to medium size to small. So you go from your church environment, your sermon, let's say Sunday morning or whenever you have your church service. That's the first environment. That's the largest environment. That's a large, in most cases, it's a large group environment where you're preaching a sermon. Now notice in that environment, it's not a conversation, it's a sermon. So keep that in mind. The next environment is the small group environment. So your small groups, even your families, in a certain sense, families are like small groups, right? So if you've got families in your church, you've got small groups in your church already. And so in that environment, it's, a handful of people, maybe 4, 5, up to 12, maybe a little bit larger than that. But that's that second environment. And organizationally, it's important. If you want a healthy church, it's great to have small groups and small group leaders that are trained up. You can use our small group training to train those guys up for that particular environment. And the third environment is the mentoring environment. Now, when we use the word mentoring, we're talking about disciple making. We're talking about personally sharing the truth in love. But a lot of people ask the question, well, wait, which ones, is mentoring different than small groups? Is it different than large group? Well, again, if you think in general terms, all of these environments are places where you're sharing the truth. But what's happening is you're going from the large group to the mentoring, to the very small group, right? You're going from large to small. So what you're doing is you're going from impersonal, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just saying when I preach a sermon, it's not very personal. It's pretty impersonal. I'm sort of casting the widest net possible for people to understand some concepts, but it's not a conversation. We don't intentionally invite people to share feedback. Every once in a while, some weirdo, says something, and then you kind of have to just mitigate the situation because a sermon is not intended to be a conversation. But the way we see it, sermons are intended to spark conversation. So the goal is, we're catalyzing from this large group environment, the Sunday morning environment, where we're talking in broader terms, and what we're doing is we're trying to send that down to the small groups and to families so that they can talk about it and process it. Because in that environment, it's better because the leader or the parent now can help the people in the group to really understand, what does that really mean? What part of that sermon is for me? And how can I talk about it and process it in this smaller group? And then really even the mentoring environment, if you're going one-on-one with someone, you can get even more personal. Because remember, what mentoring is personally sharing the truth and love with somebody. So see, as a mentor, I can do a lot more speaking truth and love to someone one-on-one or one-on-two or three, because I can get super specific about what they need to talk about. Whereas in a large group environment, when I'm preaching a sermon, I'm just throwing it out there and hoping something sticks, so that the Holy Spirit will somehow bring some fruit to that in people's lives. But the best way for my sermons to have fruit and to make change and create life change in people's lives is if small group leaders and parents know what to do with that, and they can take that and help sort of apply it in the specific context or situation in their small group or in their one-on-one mentoring conversation. So really the goal, it's not about which one's better. Every environment has a different role, has a different function, but it's really, I think it's valuable for us to understand, okay, are we using the large group environment in the right way? Are we looking at that right? Like what conversations, what sermons how should we preach there compared to the small group and family environments? Are we, equipping and empowering those environments for conversations? And then that mentoring environment, do we have more and more people trained up, ready to go one-on-one, one-on-two? Because again, I think that's the best place to really personally bring truth into someone's life. So ideally, a mature Christian is involved in all three of those environments, certainly in the large group environment and the mentoring environment, if not that small group environment. So think about those three environments, use those resources below to talk about that with your church or ministry team in mind.